Generation Next. Are you ready? For many of us who have grown up in a different time from our younger students, we really need to think about the best way to communicate with them, certainly based on the fact that we have different cultural experiences than our students. So it's important for us to think about what we want, how we can communicate with them most effectively to get the best learning. Robin Leitner and I'm Ruth Benander, worked on this presentation to talk about the kinds of things you need to think about as one generation speaking to another. For kids these days, they were generally born pretty late. Their formative experience includes the internet and the World Trade Center. That for those two things have always been true. The formation of the family is quite different now, and the attitude towards marriage is maybe not something to aim for. Education for these people is an experience. It's a way to develop, but it's also important to get money from your job. And so there's a more practical and experiential orientation to getting an education. And work for many of our students is a means to an end and not a career that they expect to have for the rest of their lives. At work, their assets for these younger people is an optimism and the belief that they can multitask, or rather they can shift their focus quickly. And they have a technological familiarity, but we can't confuse that with technological savvy, and we still need to teach them about how to use different kinds of technology, but they may be less resistant to new technology. The liabilities means that they have a need for supervision and structure. They really need to be shown what to do because in some cases they've had the helicopter parents or helicopter teachers, and they're not entirely sure how to strike out on their own. They also have a lot of inexperience in handling difficult communication. They have a hard time communicating in a tactful way or to be able to understand what formal versus informal is. So we need to help them understand how to have those skills so that they can be more effective in the work environment. The modern values that we need to keep in mind, whether you agree with them or not, it's just this is where things are right now, is that there is a belief in the balance of life and work, and that your work shouldn't take over your entire life. There is in fact less loyalty to the workplace as students expect to have more than one career, and they expect a reward for effort but not necessarily quality. And this is something that we certainly need to be very clear with them about, that you made a lovely effort and that's great, but it was still wrong, and it's very important that you do it correctly. So here's how. They have less respect for traditional procedures, meaning that younger people will suggest to older people, here's a new way to do it. Before we dismiss them, it's important for us to be able to think about, wow, maybe that is an interesting alternative. They have a high value on flexibility and creativity, meaning that we need to be aware that they will look for alternatives, and we need to help them understand what alternatives are good and what alternatives might not actually fit the protocols that are expected for a particular environment. They view rules more like guidelines. This was best expressed in Pirates of the Caribbean, where they said the pirate code was really more like a guideline. Now, for those of us who understand that in a clinic there are very specific rules that must be followed, it might seem redundant and it might seem a little remedial to say, no, you can't take your cell phone here, you must put it away. But to emphasize that indeed these are not guidelines. There are rules and there are reasons for these rules, and here's why we have to do it this way. Treating people with respect is more important than cranking out a product for many of these students, and they can sometimes seem easily insulted. So it's not that we're being cruel to them, but we're certainly needing to take into account the way that they have been worked with in the past. So for example, they're used to frequent praise, and you get praised for just doing a good job. And in this context, the lack of praise is perceived as criticism, so it's important to communicate clearly. The problem of praise is that there are some kinds of praise that are helpful and some kind of praise that are not helpful. Problem praise is saying that it's an inherent talent, and certainly our popular culture supports this. That when you say, oh, you're a natural, you have a real talent for this, this doesn't communicate the fact that more often than not, we have to work really hard to be able to be good at something, particularly in healthcare. So it's important to give constructive praise, such as you worked hard for that, or you studied really hard for that test. You've put a lot of effort into this and it looks like you've really improved. To be able to talk about the fact that they can go from not being very having good facility at something to having better facility at something. An interesting problem with this is certainly Harry Potter, who does nothing to support us in this way. And he's a really good example of inherent talent. Let's take a look at Harry Potter's first flying lesson.
Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon, Madam Hooch.
Good afternoon, Amanda. Good afternoon. Welcome to your first flying lesson. Well, what are you waiting for? Everyone step up to the left side of their broomstick. Come on now, hurry up. Stick your right hand over the broom and say up.
So what we notice here as the children are practicing their lesson is that they really had no instruction at all. And they're just expected, by virtue of their talent, to do what they were told to do, and it happens.
Shut up, Harry.
Now, once you've got hold of your broom, I want you to mount it. And grip it tight. You don't want to be sliding off the end. When I blow my whistle, I want each of you to kick off from the ground hard. Keep your broom steady. Hover for a moment. Then lean forward slightly and touch back down. On my whistle, 3, 2... Mr. Longbottom. Mr. Longbottom! Come back down this instant! Mr. Longbottom! Everyone out of the way! Come on, Steve. Oh dear, it's a broken wrist. Boy, come on now, up you go. Everyone's to keep their feet firmly on the ground while I take Mr. Longbottom to the hospital wing. Understand? If I see a single broom in the air, the one riding it will find themselves out of Hogwarts before they can say Quidditch.
Did you see his face? Maybe if the fat lad had given this a squeeze, he'd remember to fall on his fat ass. Give it here, Malfoy. No. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about on the roof? What's the matter, Potter? Bit beyond your reach.
Harry, no way. You heard what Madam Hooch said. Besides, you don't even know how to fly.
But in fact, Harry does know how to fly. And in fact, the whole point of the Harry Potter experience is that it's all about inherent talent. So that one of the things that our students feel is that if you're not inherently good at something, then surely you must be bad at it. And what we need to do is work on what Carol Dweck calls the idea of a flexible mindset, to understand that it's not about inherent talent. Here's Carol Dweck telling us about the fixed mindset and the flexible mindset.
You read the labels on the foods you eat, but do you know what's in your skincare? Neutrogena Naturals, a line of natural
Some students have a fixed mindset. They believe that their basic intelligence is just a fixed trait. You have a certain amount and that's that. It makes them very concerned with how much they have. Before they do a task, they think, am I going to look smart? Am I not going to look smart? And they base their activities on whether their intelligence will be shown to advantage. Other students think that's wrong. My intelligence is something that I can develop my whole life through passion and studying and education. So then we decided, what if we taught students the growth mindset? We developed an 8-session workshop. Half of the students in the study got this 8-session workshop of study skills and a growth mindset. The other half got all study skills. The study skills were great. We thought they were motivating. They did no good whatsoever to the students because they didn't have the motivation to put them into practice. For those students, their grades continued to decline. But for the students who got the growth mindset lesson, which is your brain is like a muscle, it gets stronger with use. They learn that every time they learn something new, their brain formed new connections over time. They could increase their intellectual skills. They were told nobody laughs at babies and says how dumb they are. They just haven't learned yet. Well, they read an article about this, and there was lots of discussion, heated, animated discussion, and they were taught how to apply this to their schoolwork. At the end of the semester, they showed a significant rebound in their grades, and the teachers could pick out which students were in the growth mindset.
Even though they didn't know.
They didn't know there were even 2 workshops. Ross Bentley, kind of a world-renowned racing car coach, read my book and contacted me. He saw the connection between a growth mindset and optimal performance. These top races many of them last for hours. And in the course of the event, mistakes are inevitable. The difference between a winning driver and a losing driver is what you do with those mistakes. Over the course of our conversations, we developed some collaborative work to see whether, in fact, racing drivers who have a growth mindset are able to enter the zone and stay in the zone even after they've made mistakes. It's so important in the business world for people at all levels to believe in the growth of skills, to be able to admit mistakes and overcome them. You can't keep up with this changing world if you can't grow and can't learn. So that's one very important application. But the other is, you can't be a mentor, a good mentor, without having a growth mindset. And so it tells you how one group is really going around the world curious to learn, and the other is going around the world wanting to feel smart. When it comes to your brain, don't lock down. Keep those neurons connecting.
So clearly, when we want to give our students feedback, we want to make sure that we emphasize their effort, that we emphasize their strategy choices, and that we talk about our own struggles to learn, and we help them understand that learning isn't about basic talent. Learning is a process where you look at your mistakes and you can analyze your mistakes. It's not that mistakes are necessarily okay, particularly not in a healthcare setting, but it's important when they happen to look at them and not become totally demoralized, and not to think that you're going to be perfect all the time, to minimize error, but also to learn from errors. So say you have a student who's messed up a procedure and is very upset. What should you say? I know you're smart and you'll do better next time. That's not a good one, because that's that fixed mindset. You're smart. The only reason you're going to do better is this inherent talent. You should have been able to do that, but maybe you thought too much about it. Oh no, we shouldn't criticize them for thinking about what they're doing. What about this procedure isn't very important, you'll do it better next time? No, in fact, this procedure is important, but what went wrong this time so that this mistake won't happen again? Clearly your performance was not very good. What can you do differently next time to perform better? This is the best answer. because in this way you say, you acknowledge, yes, there was an error. You're not going to get points just for effort if it was still wrong, but how can we learn from this to do better next time? What this is part of is the self-regulated learning cycle, where you plan what you're going to do, you practice it, and then you evaluate what you did, how it went. And so this is where reflection is very, very important. Ways that we can support this is to give students planning sheets or do goal setting, to do rating activities to see how well they did on something, and to give them reflection opportunities. This is so important, so that they get into the habit, they cultivate the habit of mind of reflecting, not just getting through the day. Another thing that's very important is the idea of transfer of learning, is making connections between what they've previously learned, perhaps in classes, to be able to transfer that into clinicals. Transfer, we know, is hard. Students don't believe in transfer. They think that their courses sometimes are just compartmentalized and separate. They also don't know that we expect them to do this transfer, that we expect them to take the theoretical knowledge that they learned in one class and apply it in another. So they compartmentalize this knowledge. We need to acknowledge that the work that they did in previous classes so that they can use it in these classes. And we also need to set clear goals that say, here's what you learned in this class, here's how you're applying it here. Now, to us as professionals, we might say, well, it's totally clear how what you did in this particular class is going to be applied in the clinic. But our precious students need to hear us say this very clearly so we can scaffold that experience for them. Ways that we can promote transfer is to be explicit about what we expect them to transfer, to make reference to that, to be explicit about what we expect them to have learned in a previous experience, and talk about this in meetings to clarify these shared expectations, because sometimes what you expect them to be able to transfer may not have been something that they learned in quite the way that you expect them to make that transfer. Now, when we're talking about all of this, we need to differentiate evaluation from observation, and we have to differentiate feeling from thinking, because sometimes when we tell someone that they've done something wrong, they may hear that as personal criticism, and they may not be able to do appropriate reflection. So we need to connect the needs and values that are being met or not met in relation to what is happening. And that's why a clear observation about what we see happening is important for this reflection that we talked about before. So we need to request what we would like in a way that clearly and specifically states what we do want, rather than what we don't want. Rather than, don't do this and this and this, phrase it as, do this and this and this. A really nice way to deal with this, particularly when there's something difficult, for example, a cell phone. When you text while I'm trying to talk to you, I feel like you're ignoring me. I need you to not be texting while we're having demonstrations. So would you please put your phone in the basket? So this is very clear about the behavior, the result of the behavior, the desired behavior, and the action that will promote that. So it's important for you to identify a pet peeve from the clinic or your workplace so that you can state your position, so that you can share the facts, tell your story about that, ask for, perhaps you could also ask for the other person's perception, and then talk about what is fact and what is assumption to encourage these different views. So that's really important for clarifying a situation. Like a student may be making suggestions that are inappropriate, but she feels like she's trying to be helpful. So that's one person may be insulted and the other person is insulted because she thought she was trying to be helpful. So the enduring points from all of this is that we want to encourage a growth mindset, we want to make our expectations of transfer explicit, and we need to communicate clearly about what we want. If you're interested in more information on this, the Pew Research Project on Generation Next is very interesting, and it talks a lot about expectations of new generations. There's also a really great PBS documentary online. Or you can just Google Generation Next PBS, and the PBS site is going to be your first choice. And it's very interesting to watch the information that they have. In order to get the certificate for this activity, you need to do a reflection activity to think about the information that has been in this short presentation. So what you need to do is write a 4-paragraph reflection. First, identify a problem that you have with students in the clinic. Be clear about what you observe and what you would desire to actually happen. In the next paragraph, discuss what you can do to reinforce the desired behavior. What kind of constructive praise can you offer? Can you give structured material or rating activities? And based on the when you X, I feel Y, I need you to do this, so would you please do this and this? Based on that formula, write out how you might address a problem behavior in a constructive way that would promote learning. Then, in your last paragraph, outline what previous experience you believe your students have had and explain how you'll communicate this expectation of transfer to them. Once you've written these 4 paragraphs, send your reflection activity of 4 paragraphs to me, ruth.benander@uc.edu, and Mary Kay Scaramucci at scaramamuk@ucmail.uc.edu, and we will provide you with feedback. After our consultation, you'll get a certificate for having completed this activity.